Thanks for tuning in to Proudly in Conversation. Josh Babarinde OBE is a Liberal Democrat MP for Eastbourne. In Parliament, he has become a leading voice on domestic abuse reform, successfully pushing ministers to strengthen domestic abuse law within his first year. Now, President of the Liberal Democrats, Josh brings lived experience and an LGBTQ+ lens to his work. In this episode, we talk about what still needs to change to improve life for LGBTQ+ communities, particularly at a time of rising populist politics, and why courage and transformational leadership matter. Josh is clear, we don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to learn how to disagree well with humanity and respect. I'm your host, Simon Blake, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Josh to the sofa.
Thank you so much for having me, Simon. I'm Josh Babarinde. I'm the Liberal Democrat MP for Eastbourne, which is officially the sunniest town in the UK, more sunlight hours than anywhere else.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. And in fact, no other town has got more sunlight hours than us since, or we've had that record since 1911. Basically.
I'm from Cornwall, so I'm struggling to agree, but I'm not going to take issue just yet.
I'll leave now. Liberal Dem MP for Eastbourne. I'm the president of the Liberal Democrats, and I am a proud gay MP.
And how long have you been an MP, Josh?
I thought you were going to say, how long have I been gay then? So, well, quite a long time. I was elected in July 2024, so nearly 2 years.
And as a gay man, for however long you've been gay, we'll leave that question unanswered. What's it been like being in Parliament, and any surprises?
Yeah, I mean, generally, Parliament is a bonkers place. It's an honour to be there, to represent in the town where I grew up, where I'm born and bred, and representing lots of my old school teachers, neighbours, scout leaders, etc., etc. But I mean, Westminster as a place is extraordinary. It is a big bubble. It's a bubble full of lots of people who want to do really good for their communities and do really good for the country. But there's also a lot of out of touchness, which everyone pretty much knows about, that happens because that bubble seems so insulated from what communities up and down the country are facing, including the LGBTQ+ community. And so one of my missions really has been to try to burst that on behalf of the people I represent, on behalf of the people who I think need an even greater voice, and on behalf of so many of those people who are really losing out based on the way that society is stacked at the moment. And there's lots of us trying to do that work, not just in my party, but beyond. But it is exhilarating. And 2 years in, I remain just as fired up in that job as I did when I started.
And did you know that you wanted to burst the bubble? Was that your sense when you went in, or is that something that you've learned within Parliament, when you've been in Westminster?
A bit of both, to be honest. I knew that Westminster was not delivering for my community in Eastbourne. I knew that our voices just weren't properly being heard. I knew that we were thinking or voting or feeling a particular way and generally weren't getting what should have been our part of the deal. And that's one reason why I stood. That's one reason why I was committed to standing for quite some time. But also on getting elected, it is just desperately clear why there is such a remoteness. It's desperately clear that there are some in Westminster who just get addicted to the rush, to the adrenaline, to the gossip of the place, and really forget what the point is.
And if we were just to take that and think about it in relation to the LGBTQ+ community, these are tricky times, they're turbulent times, that lots of things that we expected to make progress on haven't. Trans and non-binary people at the sharp end of a culture war, and yet we have the gayest parliament in history. So can you just sort of extrapolate what you've just said about that sort of remoteness and think about how then do we end up with LGBTQ plus issues, being addressed, dealt with, considered, not considered within the context of Westminster?
Well, I think one of the things that's going on is that lots of people feel failed by the kind of traditional, two big parties, Labour and the Conservatives, and that's created a political opportunity for populists to exploit and to say, we're not like them, we do our own thing. And what populists tend to do is mug people of their insecurities, fears, and the rest, and use them as a weapon to put down certain communities, all for the purpose of their own political gain. And we have seen populists do exactly that and put down whether it's trans and non-binary people, and indeed the wider LGBTQ plus community, whether it's people from migrant backgrounds in particular, and that is feeding this kind of populist frenzy. And that, as far as I'm concerned, has no place in our society, has no place in our politics. And I think a really big responsibility of people like me is to show that you can do politics differently and that you don't have to demonize people who are already among the most discriminated against folks in our society in order to kind of present a vision of the country that people will buy into. It's just not necessary to do that, and it's not morally right, above all else. And I think that is that's part of kind of what's driving what we're seeing today. And I'm a liberal, both capital L and small l, because I believe that people should live the kind of lives that they want to live. John Stuart Mill talked about this a long, long time ago, the harm principle. Go about your own business as long as you're not harming anybody else. Mind your own damn business, I think, is a pretty good liberal adage that we should be using much, much more, and I think could be of huge benefit to so many communities across our country, including the LGBTQ plus community. But I also think that one of the things we're seeing is a kind of polarization. Polarization on kind of that side of the argument, and people really demonizing trans and non-binary people in particular. But also that's creating kind of greater confrontation. It is kind of turning up the heat and really puts everyone else on the defensive in a way that I have not seen in my lifetime quite so intensely. And that feels scary to trans and non-binary people who I speak to. That feels scary. And many of them are thinking, well, we don't know where to turn. Who is going to protect us from this? And how can we empower ourselves and others to fight this ultimately liberal fight? And I think a liberal society is what most people in this country want to achieve.
We completely agree. And one of the things, the polling continues to show it, doesn't it? More in time and time again, that the issues that are often used to divide are not necessarily the issues that people care most about. But this is not wholly a politics show. But I guess the bit which I'm really interested in, Justin, is thinking about that politics of division. That wider bit. How do you see that being addressed? So we do build those coalitions around important issues when it comes to advancing LGBTQ plus rights, both within nationally within Westminster, but also within local communities. We're seeing division, polarization, and sometimes people just not able to find the things that they agree on because they're so focused on the things that they disagree on.
Yeah, and it was Joe Cox, wasn't it, who said, we've got much more in common than that which divides us. And actually, since around that time, since the Brexit referendum, that was a completely different issue that polarized society. And we've seen that kind of reappear in all different ways, shapes, and forms. And as a society, not just in this country, but across lots of the West, it has become normal to become so divided. It has become normal to focus so much on kind of what people's differences are. And I remember a time when it was utterly normal to celebrate your differences, where it was normal to recognize that you had a different view from someone else, and like that was fine. You could agree to disagree without hating each other. But whether it is the rise of populists, whether it is the kind of petrol-like role that some corners of our social media play in terms of inflaming different debates. And something I've always believed is that it's really important to meet someone where they're at if you're having a disagreement with somebody, because a fair chunk of the time, what sits beneath someone's differing opinion is maybe an experience of theirs, which is their truth, whether we like it or not. It is an experience of theirs or some assumption that they are holding, some way that they view the world, that we really need to understand, even if we disagree with it. We need to understand what the fear, the anxiety, whatever it might be that sits beneath it. And they may have been sold a particular solution, often by someone who isn't really serious about that solution, but is just using them for their own ends. And we need to present a counter offer. We need to present another kind of argument. And so when I go around, whether it's in my patch or across the country, and I meet people who have different views to me on things like whether it's LGBTQ plus rights, or whether it is the European Union, or whether it is tax, or whatever it is, first port of call, rather than turn my back on those people, is to understand what it is that's driving it. And if we don't do that understanding piece, I think we're going to really struggle to move towards a kind of, greater consensus where we celebrate difference, or indeed where we bring people with us. Yeah. We need to bring people with us in order to enact and engender change. And sometimes that can be pretty quick. Sometimes that can take generations. But what is guaranteed is that if we demonize anyone who disagrees with us without understanding them first, no matter how frustrating they may be or how much I might actually despise views that they're holding, we're never going to get anywhere. We will just continue butting heads.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's so many bits in that. And one of them is, do we have to agree to have empathy? Do we have to agree to behave well? And when does the disagreement become the argument? And how do you move beyond that? Because it feels right now as though it is all about the argument. And I grew up, in a religious household, and until the day they died, my mum and dad would never have said that God didn't exist, and I don't have a view. I don't believe it. So that we could have argued about it forever, but we didn't. We just learned to accept it and to live with it. And I guess I worry sometimes that we're trying to persuade people that we have to believe the same things in order to be able to live well together. So I'd be interested in your view on that. Clearly, we've got to have the conversations, have the arguments, and to develop empathy, but we don't all have to agree.
Yeah, and there are many things that I really wish that we did all agree on. I've got views about things that I hold very strongly, and there are some things that I wish that were not a matter of debate at all. And there are some things that I think shouldn't be a matter of debate, really. Whether we treat LGBTQ plus people with humanity, with decency and respect, well, that for me is a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a debate. But there are some people who don't believe in that. And I want to know why. Because if I know why, I can best make an argument to try to dispel some of the assumptions that sit underneath those deplorable views. And maybe we can reach a place where, we're in the same place on that. And if we're not, well, I know that I've done everything that I can. I've done my bit. And I can move on to trying to engage with somebody else to try to shift the needle on something. But I think disagreeing well is an art that society, especially in the West, is forgetting bit by bit. And I think that's taken us to a really dangerous place. A dangerous place where some of those kind of advancing extremes do so, I think, thinking that they're the kind of majority view and that they've got a kind of mandate.
And it's a really important point, isn't it, about loudness does not necessarily represent majority view, and social media can sometimes really turn up the volume and not only polarize debate, but also give a really false sense of what's happening. Do you see that reflected in the way that your constituents show up to conversations with you around either a sense that they're part of a majority, a sense that they're part of a minority with misinformation? How does that show up in your local constituency?
Yeah, I mean, social media is a double-edged sword in my constituency and in any other. It has enabled people to have much more direct access to people who shape opinion or people who make decisions, and I sit kind of in between those two groups, and I think that's fantastic. And if people want to tell me about something I've done that they don't like, or they want to give me an idea for how to improve my constituency or the country, that's great. They can do that. But yeah, where things become problematic is when, courtesy and disagreeing well is lost. When people hide behind, fake accounts or whatever, in order to spew stuff out without them themselves being held accountable, and without them needing to or feeling as though they need to kind of uphold some kind of standard of digital citizenship. It becomes a problem there. It becomes a problem when people use social media to intimidate, and far from being the public square where online everyone's welcome, it becomes the public square where only those who feel kind of safe enough and brave enough are welcome. And we know that when spaces, whether in person or online, become so heated in that kind of way, it is people from LGBTQ plus communities, it's people from ethnic minority communities, it is women, it is disabled people, the list goes on, who are disempowered to the point of none or far less participation. And then you end up with a completely skewed debate that is happening online. A debate that, because there's so many people involved and so many big opinions, may appear to be, the comprehensive debate, but we know it's not, because there are people with very valid, very valuable opinions who are often keeping them to themselves or organising in safer corners of our society, but away from the central debate. And something that politicians need to do, and indeed something that Stonewall has been doing for years, is supporting people to come out of those corners and to reclaim the kind of spaces at the centre of discussion, at the centre of our society, so that they can be heard. And something that I've tried to do in the House of Commons is to give those people a voice, in some cases by specifically soliciting their opinions and reading them out verbatim in some cases, or representing them in the Commons, or indeed just taking, what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, what I'm observing, and reflecting that in the way that I vote, in the way that I speak up in the Commons, in the way that I troubleshoot outside of Westminster, in order, again, to help shift the needle.
And earlier this year, we had the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia, Intersexism and Lesbophobia. And the theme of it was the heart of democracy. And what you've just been talking about, really is about, democratic engagement, about people being able to engage with democracy. One of the things that I've been hearing more and more is sometimes people don't quite know how to have the conversation when it comes to LGBTQ plus issues, or if they get into conversation and they don't get it absolutely right, that they worry. And so it stops people talking. I'd just be interested in any reflections that you might have about that and its impact on democracy.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that stifles progress quite significantly, actually. There are loads of people, MPs in Parliament and beyond, who absolutely believe in advancing the rights of LGBTQ plus people. And many of them are very vocal about that, and that's incredible. But there are lots of people who really, really believe in the cause and don't feel empowered, I guess, to be, vocal advocates in many ways, for the exact reason that you shared, Simon, that there are so many sensitivities, very understandable sensitivities within our community, about identity and labels and lived experience, etc. And it really can, for many, feel like a bit of a minefield, kind of navigating all of that, and thinking about how can I be a responsible advocate and use all the right language, and not tread on someone else's toes, and not offend people by inadvertently saying something wrong. And that, I think, has led to lots of would-be advocates staying pretty quiet, or quieter than they otherwise would have been. And we really need those people in order to advance our community's rights. We really, really do. We can't do it alone. And there are, politicians that I have spoken to, including MPs, who are like, I really want to stand up and speak in this debate, or speak in this rally, but I don't really know what to say. Is it okay to say this or to say that? And so, as a member of the community myself, I've kind of made myself available to a number of colleagues and said, I have some of those moments myself. But I can tell you, if you want to hear what I think as a gay man about X, Y, Z that you might be thinking, safe space here. I'm not gonna judge you. Like, let's create that space. I might challenge you, but I think that is really important. And by the same token, there are people from the community who have made that same very generous and vulnerable kind of offer to me and said, for example, when it comes to trans rights, Josh, you can talk to me about anything. There are no silly questions, even though you might think there are. And having those kind of spaces and opportunities is a real privilege. And I think the more of those that we can create or facilitate, them, the more heat we can take out of some of these debates, and the more allies and indeed members of the community themselves we can empower to kind of get with the programme.
So one of the things that I'm really intrigued about is how, when we talk about MPs not always feeling as though they can talk about LGBTQ plus issues for fear of getting it wrong, how do people like me, how do activists, how do parents who are worried about their children, how do community and grassroots groups reach out to their local councillors, to their MPs, and encourage them to do what it sounds as though lots of people want to do, which is to advocate, but feel as though they can't in case they get it wrong? What advice would you give?
Well, something that has really helped me have been the creation of safe spaces for me to ask questions, to challenge and be challenged, without massive scene being caused for fear of getting it wrong. So I think in particular of in Eastbourne, there's a great charity called Born Out LGBT, run by Betty and Mandy. They are local legends. They challenge me hard on a lot of things, and it's not always comfortable, but it's always done safely. And by the same token, I might have questions, I might have things that I want to know about, learn about in terms of what's happening for our community across the country or indeed locally. And we have those discussions. And I find that exceptionally helpful. And I think that if more spaces or more opportunities like that existed for policymakers, I think that would be an infinitely helpful thing for our community's cause.
And can I just check a bit? When you say safe spaces, you don't necessarily mean comfortable. You mean safe enough to have uncomfortable conversations. So brave spaces.
Brave spaces, yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
Just safe spaces sometimes gets a bad rap, doesn't it? As you can only say what people want. So, and are they, do you say Betty and Mary?
Betty and Mandy.
Betty and Mandy. Community members, part of a group?
Yeah. So Betty and Mandy are a lesbian couple. Betty, well, their story is inspirational. Betty has spoken a lot about hers in particular. So she was kicked out of the army, basically, for being a lesbian. And she then became a bus driver in London, and became the first woman bus driver union rep, I think is what she was in particular, and was a big player in growing Pride in London. She brought Pride to Eastbourne in 2016, and organised it year after year after year, until retiring last year. And I mean, she will be very involved in this year's, but she definitely deserves a break from the organising, together with Mandy. But their organisation, their charity locally, is it's a cafe. Anyone can go into the cafe, but when you go in, it is a wonderful kind of hive of all sorts of activity, including people from the LGBTQ plus community hanging out, chilling. I'll go in there, there'll be a bit of banter about, I don't know, some kind of local politics issue that they want to grill me on. I'll tell them about my wedding plans and all that kind of stuff. So physically it's a safe and brave space, but I think one of the most important things for me in terms of that space as a policymaker is the opportunity for discussion, for exchange, for challenge, without feeling nervous that if I say or tread out of place, that there's going to be catastrophe.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I remember various conversations with some of the founders of Stonewall, including Ian McKay and Michael Cashman. Their bit was, we gave people the arguments and told them why it was important they made them. We helped them to work out who the people were to make the arguments to. When they got it wrong, we helped them to reshape it and refine it. And then we helped to work out some of the next bits. Whereas now, sometimes it's you should know the arguments, you should be able to make them better, and we're going to criticise you when you've had a go. And that can worry people. And I think that sense of, of course, we've got to be always conscious about intent and about pain and trauma that already exists that we're operating within. But if we can't find a way for people to be able to have those conversations, then, like you say, it's going to be problematic for the whole community. But coming with the territory, I mean, I get challenged with most things that we say in some way, shape or form. So you also have to acknowledge that just by entering into public conversations about anything, actually, that there will be challenge that comes with it, because that is the nature of discourse at the moment. So there's that sort of bit where it's like, we don't want people to be put off because they're worried about getting it wrong. But equally, there are very few things that you can get completely right and not expect some kind of commentary on.
Definitely. And I also think, this is a challenge that's not exclusive to the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, speaking as a man of colour, I see it in kind of the race equality world, where there will be people who get tied up in knots when they're kind of trying to talk about what I look like, whether I'm black or mixed race, or is person of colour the okay term to use, or there are all sorts. And I generally don't mind, as long as the intent is good. I don't mind, and I've made that very, very clear to folks, because I want them to feel empowered to actually just move to the argument beyond trying not to offend me. The argument is far more important than I am. But I think also something that's really important to remember, and again, I draw on my experiences as a man of colour, but I think there are some kind of parallel insights for the LGBTQ plus community as well, is while it's in, lots of people from the LGBTQ plus community will be happy with kind of open discussions to support people to understand more and be better advocates, it is not fair to expect members of the community to kind of perform that function. And I haven't experienced it so much in light of my gay identity, but in terms of my identity as a person of colour, I remember during the riots, the Black Lives Matter riots following the murder of George Floyd, there was all this hoo-ha about, should you post a black square on Instagram or shouldn't you? And should you say this or not? And so lots of people said, Josh, what should I be doing here? What should I be saying here? This thing that I'm going to post on social media, do you think it's okay? And I went back, and it was, mates who were asking in really good faith. And I was so chuffed they felt comfortable enough to do that. But my response was, look, I'm not Martin Luther King. I don't know all of this. I can tell you about how I feel in response to what you've said, but I cannot speak for a whole community of people of colour, because there are differing views, and the same is true in the LGBTQ plus community. It's not a monolith that all moves in the same direction all of the time. There is huge diversity within it that has to be respected. It's ultimately on allies to get themselves in a position to advocate adequately. There are many people in the community who will gladly help with that. But kindness, I think, needs to underpin that empowerment.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I've been, I'm in my 50s now and started doing HIV prevention work in 1992. So what's that, 30 plus years ago. And there wasn't social media, there weren't platforms. The only opportunities to engage were to go into rooms with people. You were doing the wind-up modem, so it wasn't as easy as Google it. So for me and my generation, that bit of educating others does feel like something which was just a natural part. And it's a real significant shift over the last 20 years or so, which is Google it. But actually, at a time when people are able so easily to dehumanize people and are dehumanizing people, Google doesn't create that human element to it. So there's something here that feels like it's at odds in some ways. There's more information and more knowledge, but that is knowledge what wins hearts and minds, or is it stories? Is it sitting in a room and just people going, I just want to be able to do the washing up. I just want to be able to go to the toilet. I just want to be able to go out into the pub without fear. I want to be able to go to work and to not worry about pronouns or whatever it is that people have. So, there's something which just sits in the back of my head here, which is how do we advance the conversation unless we're willing to have the conversation? So you talk about being a safe person, but that people can come to. I think we all have to be a person that people can feel able to ask questions of without feeling the responsibility to have to answer everything.
Completely agree. And I think, social media and technology generally, you're right, carries all these risks and baggage, but it also has the ability to disseminate stories at scale. And to catalyze that learning and that education piece in a way that would have been unimaginable in 1992.
All right.
I won't tell you what year I was born in, so
I'll look it up.
But seriously, the opportunity that it represents is incredible. And there are lots of people telling their stories using technology to share. You are doing a lot of that work too. But social media has taken it's mutated and not going in the best direction. Something that reminds me of though is the kind of work and the growing work and practice of like citizens' assemblies and things like that. And we've spoken about the likes of populists and politicians who are doing a fair amount to undermine our cause for all the great work being done by others to advance it. But politics as a space has become more toxic than I have certainly ever known it. But I really trust people to take the heat out of that and to have those kind of conversations and to do that storytelling among one another, to kind of land somewhere that is fair. And I've been doing a lot of work in Eastbourne to experiment with citizens' assemblies to help make decisions that politicians otherwise would have made, that politicians would have made in the context of this social media spiral that doesn't always result in the best outcomes. And the stuff I've been experimenting with locally is more about how we should spend cash on certain things and certain projects and certain services, and it's just getting started. But I'm really excited about how actually just randomly selecting a group of people from across the town to educate themselves on topics that they might have absolutely no knowledge about, like about investing in heritage structures, which might be something that is done with the money, or environmental preservation with the sea and the downland that we have in Eastbourne, getting themselves to a place where they've got lots of the kind of scientific and information from the experts that they can then combine with their heart and their soul to make some pretty some decisions that are kind of devoid of the hot, nasty politics. And we've seen how, on much bigger moral issues like abortion and indeed same-sex marriage in Ireland, citizens' assemblies have kind of been deployed to help take the heat out of certain arguments. And I'd be really interested to see how on some ostensibly kind of intractable issues in our country, more nationally, can be kind of addressed through not necessarily a citizens' assembly itself, but through the kind of discipline of equipping yourself with independent information and getting people in a room together to kind of hash it out without the hoo-ha of politics, social media, and the rest around it. I think a lot of good could be done by that approach.
Yeah. So that whole concept of participatory democracy, and I think I just want to really reiterate, I agree with you. Social media has been such a critical, force for good, as well, and the internet, and particularly for LGBTQ plus people. I just want to start moving towards wrapping up a bit, and it feels to me as though progress has always been made when there's been courage. And that's taken politicians with courage, that's taken community leaders with courage, it's taken activists and organisations to stand up. And we've just had the King's speech, which has got banning conversion practices in for the fourth time.
Yeah.
And we've been waiting for code of practice and real concerns about how it will reflect the importance of inclusion as the foundational principle for trans and non-binary people and wider LGBT community and the implications of that. And just be interested in your sense about whether there is something that we can do to rebuild courage. Is there less courage than there used to be within politics, or in communities, or are there too many things which people are worried about? It feels like something feels slightly different. And I'd just be interested, you've spoken openly about experience around domestic abuse. You've taken courageous stances within Parliament. And where are we on that issue of courage, and what do we need to encourage courage in our leaders?
I think one of the things politicians are scared of is, but what happens if the risk doesn't pay off? Politicians are going to get booted out. People's lives could end up being worse as a result of some changes or some risks that are being taken. Let's just do the easy thing and just stick with a slow incremental growth. I think people are crying out for a bit more risk taking. Social media sometimes makes that difficult. The moment something goes wrong, pile on. But I think we need a bit more of that fire. And it's the lack of that is the reason that banning conversion therapy, which is obviously deplorable, still hasn't been done. I've literally lost count of the number of prime ministers who've promised that. I think even Liz Truss promised to do that at one point. We need politicians, and I hold myself to this standard, to be more up for taking risks that could generate transformational return for our communities. They need to be done safely. They need to be done sensibly, and they need to be done with a mandate from people, from the public. But I think the public are increasingly ready for that.
So that seems a good point to ask you a question. If you were to give your advice to your younger self, what would be the advice?
My advice to my younger self would be I spent a lot of time as a very underconfident person who thought I shouldn't do something because it might not work out or because I wasn't good enough. The advice is the same as Nike's advice: just do it. Whether that is, pursuing my political career, whether it was coming out. I was 25 when I came out. I wish I came out far earlier in hindsight. I was just so scared for lots of reasons that'll be familiar to lots of people watching. And also, speaking about the domestic abuse that my family suffered. I spoke about that when I was in my mid-20s as well, and I wish I spoke about it sooner. And I've bowled over by, in all of those scenarios, actually, how much people just wanted to support, how much people wanted to offer love, and how much people wanted to lift me up, not take me down. So just do it, because for all the crap that's out there, society is kind.
And I'd absolutely agree with that. And I mean, it's such a truism. Love is louder than hate. Yeah. But we just have to hear it and to look for it sometimes, because it's easy to see. Any particular books or podcasts that you would be recommending people?
Well, an extension of the Citizens Assembly and participatory democracy stuff that I was talking about earlier would be Citizens by John Alexander. Would highly recommend it as a kind of an amazing book that outlines the theory behind a lot of this, but also some kind of practical examples of how citizen participation has actually improved outcomes and trust in politics.
And then finally, if you were to have a magic wand which was going to just give you the moment to transform things for everybody across the LGBTQ plus community, what action would you take with that wand in your hand?
I'm going to say two things. I'm going to cheat. So the first quite practical thing is, if I was emperor of the world, then I would abolish the laws that criminalize homosexuality and being an LGBTQ plus person. I think it's about 60 countries or more where it's still criminal. Yeah. Indeed, in the country of my heritage, Nigeria, it's punishable by death. If I could change anything overnight, it would be that. The other thing is really inspired by the words of Giselle Pellico. She has spoken about this in the context of being a survivor of sexual abuse and rape. She has said, shame must change sides. And I think that that applies. I'd love to see that when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community. There is so much shame that is held within our community, held in large part because it is imposed on us. And that shame should change sides, and the shame should lie with those who seek to demean people for being who they want to be and loving who they want to love.
Absolutely. Shame should change sides is a motto, perhaps a saying that we should hold for lots and lots of things, but certainly for this one. Josh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, please do subscribe to Proudly in Conversation so you don't miss future episodes. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's discussion, and you can contact us via the email in the show notes. I'm Simon Blake. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to sharing more conversations like this soon.
LGBTQ plus you plus me, we're free.